All right, everybody. So today we're going to continue on with our standard 1.4. Talked about the last time the rise of big businesses, and you started to learn a little bit about the men that helped kind of become like these giant industries in the United States, like Andrew Carnegie, John D. Rockefeller, Cornelius Vanderbilt, and so on and so forth. So as these men and others, get super, super wealthy and such, there's definitely going to be a reaction to the rise of big businesses and monopolies in general and such. So today we're going to talk about like the changing attitudes towards wealth and some of the arguments that are made during this time period about like wealth and what government's role is or should not be. So the essential question for today is identify and explain the different attitudes towards the wealthy during the Gilded Age, and so it should be the wealthy, right? So students will use historical evidence to compare how individual capitalist leaders used entrepreneurship, free markets, and strategies to build their business. So that is the standard, but we're going to kind of dive into a little more depth about the attitude towards the wealthy at this time. So context is new technology, corporations, and laissez-faire policies and government led to the rise of big business in the United States. And then because these businesses use vertical and horizontal integration as a strategy, they were able to effectively form monopolies that took up much of the market. And because they're the only companies selling certain products, they became very, very, very wealthy. Now, there's a kind of pushback against monopolies as a whole, and something that we'll talk about more when we get to the progressive era, some reforms that come as a result of the pushback against monopolies. Many people argued that monopolies were bad for the economy and for democracy. A small number of them were believe that, or many of them believe that the small number of powerful businesses would ultimately lead to influencing the government in ways that would benefit the businesses and not for the people as a whole. They believe that the lack of competition would lead to the less variety and choice of products, as well as, how do I put this? They, could raise the prices up, on something that people need. And because there's no competition, you don't have, people having the choice to choose from cheaper products and so forth. And so what the price is, and they have to pay it, which is not something that you want in a free market system. And then also, there's debates about, the fairness of allowing big businesses to have, and then also a lot of new attitudes towards wealth start to emerge. And so questions like, what should a government's role be? Should it be bigger and regulating business? Some would say that the wealthy should be taxed much more, especially a higher percentage than those of the working poor. And then certainly whether or not the United States government should break up these monopolies. And that's something we'll talk about further down the road. And then there's also the question of how does one get rich in America? Is it luck? Is it hard work? Is it these unethical practices that some of these businessmen are being accused of doing? So that's something that, certainly is in the public debate at this time and era. So one argument that was made that during this time about, justifying, in a sense, why the things happen the way they do, why there's certain few individuals who become super wealthy and rise to the top over others. And one of the ideas of this time period is known as social Darwinism. And social Darwinism will come up again. We'll talk about it because it's used to justify a lot of things during this era of why one peoples can dominate over another and so forth. But it's an adaptation of Charles Darwin's survival of the fittest idea. And so this adaptation kind of put in place by Herbert Spencer and William Graham Sumner. The idea is that, in nature, the fittest animals do survive and such. And then by doing so, the way that is, it kills off the weaker species. And so you're left with a stronger animal species. So together, this social Darwinism is not all that different. And so there's arguments that saying that talent, intelligence, hard work, those are the reasons why they have risen to the top of the socioeconomic ladder. They're it's their individual talent that's allowed them to do that. And that's just a natural phenomenon. they also argue, and it takes a step further, that the weaker members of our species, essentially identifying the poor, will eventually die off over time. And what you'll end up having is a stronger species. Basically, rising tides lift all the boats. And human species altogether will rise as because we will take out the weak and allow the talented to push everyone up, because you're going to be competing to be at the top. So that's something that social Darwinists believe. They're very opposed to any government regulation. They're very opposed to government handouts and welfare, because they believed, again, that those weaker species, if they're too weak to survive in society, then they will just eventually die off. And they're also against things like safety regulations. So social Darwinist, it seems very harsh, but it was a pretty popular idea, and it was used to justify why there are so few wealthy in the country at that time. Another argument of that time was Horatio Alger's American Dream. The idea kind of come forth, what is the American Dream? Well, the American Dream is different for a lot of people, but the kind of general American dream is that if you work hard and you do things right, then eventually good things will happen to you. You will be able to make it, so to say, and what that looks like is different for everyone, but it is the basic concept. So he is an author who wrote all these dime novels, and this is something that was popular at the time. A novel that costs a dime doesn't have like a hard cover or anything like that. They're just raggedy books and such. But these dime novels, typically of his, were stories of immigrants coming to the United States, working hard, getting a little luck at the same time, and then kind of finding their own American dream. So that's kind of essentially is the central theme of his stories, is if you work hard and sometimes you'll get lucky and good things will happen to you. You'll be able to, own your own property, your own land, have a good, comfortable lifestyle with a high living standard. And that is the basic idea behind his. And so he is totally in favor of, allowing people to determine their fate rather than governments intervening in any way or sort. The last one, and one that you'll read a little bit on, you'll have a couple excerpts from this to read and to identify some themes of, but it's the Gospel of Wealth. And this is written by Andrew Carnegie. And Carnegie was, of course, one of the wealthiest men, if not the wealthiest man in America at this time. And he made his fortune primarily in steel. Now, some struggled with the social Darwinist idea because, it's very harsh. It's very matter of fact. If the species, if the poor can't survive, then they die. And it seems that they are generally okay with that. But it goes against the Christian beliefs where, Jesus Christ had taught, about helping the poor and things like that. And so just to let them to their own devices and to die off as species just really didn't sit well with many Christians, including Andrew Carnegie, who is a devout Christian. And so he has a different idea about it. And so he's going to write this novel, not novel, but essay, arguing that, yes, that I should be able to keep my money, that the government wouldn't be able to spend it better than I could. And he makes the argument also that it is the responsibility of the wealthy to give back to society in some way. Now, he's not going to argue for giving handouts like, here, if everyone gets a $5,000 check, then, that's not going to help people, because he believes that they would just use it to fuel their certain vices, drinking, smoking, whatever it is. And so his concept of the Gospel of Wealth is promoting the idea of philanthropy. Give money back to society in a way that will allow people to help themselves. And by doing so, you are providing opportunities for talented, hardworking individuals to make something of themselves and rise to the top themselves. And so he does give a lot of his money away in lots of different things and different ventures of philanthropy. But the one I think that stands out the most, and the one that is the best example of living the gospel of wealth, was his idea of funding libraries. And especially libraries in parts of the country that you typically wouldn't find, small towns, places that were along the railroad that are not connected close to the big cities. And these libraries were simple buildings, but they had plenty of books and such. And in doing so, it allowed people to read, explore, educate themselves, and then hopefully through that self-education that they could find a way to be successful in the world. So that is something of what he believed. And he funded roughly 1,700 libraries around the world, some of which are in Utah. In the town I used to live in years ago, in Tooele, Utah, they have the building still there of what was once the Carnegie Library. So this is just like something that he was promoting. He's still in favor of no government regulation, let me keep my money, but he thinks it's the responsibility of the wealthy to use that money for philanthropy, rather than to build more mansions or things of selfish nature, or pass it down to your next of kin. So this is like one idea that we'll explore with the assignment you have for today. Again, make sure you're going to answer the essential question in Canvas. But other than that, this is it for today. And for those of you, this is Friday. Make sure that you also do your quiz, because that is up on Canvas as well.